You know exactly what you should do with your money. You've made the budget. You've promised yourself you'd cut back. And somehow, month after month, the money still slips away. If that's you, here's the truth that's going to change everything. You don't have a discipline problem. You have a psychology problem. Most people don't overspend because they're irresponsible. They overspend because they're trying to solve emotional problems with financial solutions. Today I'll show you the real reason you can't stop spending, and 6 specific, practical fives you can start using immediately. Let's begin with the core idea, because it reframes the entire struggle. Most of your spending isn't driven by logic, it's driven by emotion. Many purchases have almost nothing to do with need. They're driven by stress, anxiety, boredom, loneliness, social pressure, and the pull of instant gratification. You're not buying the product, you're buying a feeling. And that's why budgets alone so often fail. A budget is a logical tool aimed at an emotional problem. Financial progress usually doesn't begin when you learn to spend less. It begins when you understand why you spend in the first place. Here's why most financial advice misses this completely. Nearly all of it focuses on the same 3 things: budgeting, cutting expenses, and spending less. All useful, all logical. But almost none of it addresses the psychology underneath the spending. So people build budget after budget, and the budgets keep collapsing, not because the math was wrong, but because the math was never the problem. They never addressed the real cause of the behavior, so the behavior kept winning. You can't out-budget an emotional habit you haven't understood. Let me show you exactly how this works in the brain, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Imagine someone has a stressful day at work. They get home, they open up Amazon, they browse, and they buy something. And for a few minutes, they feel better. Not because they needed the product, because the purchase created a temporary emotional reward. The brain releases a little hit of dopamine. The purchase feels good, and the stress momentarily disappears. The problem is that the relief is short-lived, but the spending habit remains. The stress comes back tomorrow, the next purchase gives another quick hit, and over time people build unconscious spending patterns they don't even realize they have. The issue was never the product. The issue is the emotional need hiding behind it. Let me give you a few more examples, because you'll recognize yourself in at least one. There's the stressful workday that turns into online shopping, buying to feel better. There's the person who gets a raise and immediately upgrades everything: the car, the apartment, the clothes, the whole lifestyle, without actually increasing their long-term security at all. They just raise their spending to match their income, a trap that quietly keeps people broke at every salary. There's the person scrolling social media, feeling behind compared to their friends, who start spending just to keep up with a highlight reel. And there's the classic: buying something that brings 2 days of excitement and then becomes a monthly payment for the next 3 years. In every one of these, the spending is solving an emotion: relief, status, belonging, excitement, not meeting a real need. So here are the insights to hold on to before we get to the fixes. Spending is often emotional, not logical. People buy feelings as much as they buy products. Dopamine quietly influences your financial decisions. Stress frequently increases spending. Social media constantly encourages comparison spending. Lifestyle inflation tends to happen unconsciously, one upgrade at a time. And awareness, simply understanding what's actually driving you, is the first real step toward change. You can't fix a pattern you can't see, which is exactly why understanding comes before willpower. Now let's get to the part you came for: how to actually fix it. Not with more willpower, which gets exhausted, but with 6 practical solutions you can start using today, each one designed to work with your psychology instead of against it. Solution 1. The 24-hour rule. Before making any non-essential purchase, wait 24 hours, that's it. The reason this works is that most impulse purchases are powered by an emotional spike, and emotional spikes fade. Give the feeling a single day to pass, and a huge number of must-have purchases quietly lose their appeal. The waiting period separates the emotion from the decision, so you're buying with your rational brain instead of your reactive one. The things you still want after 24 hours are usually the things genuinely worth buying. The rest were just your brain chasing a feeling. Solution 2. Identify the trigger. When the urge to spend hits, pause and ask yourself one question: what am I actually buying? Am I buying a product, or am I buying relief from stress? Validation? Excitement? Comfort? A sense of belonging? This single question is surprisingly powerful. because the moment you name the real emotional need, the urge to spend often loses its grip. You realize you're not actually shopping for the thing in the cart, you're shopping for a feeling, and there are better, cheaper ways to meet that feeling. Naming the trigger turns an automatic impulse into a conscious choice. Solution 3. Create a cooling off list. Instead of buying something the moment you want it, write it down on a list. Then revisit that list after a week or even a month. What you'll discover is that most of the things on it no longer feel important at all. The desire that felt urgent in the moment simply evaporated once the emotion behind it passed. The cooling off list gives every want time to prove whether it's real, and most of them quietly fail the test. It's the 24-hour rule stretched out for bigger purchases, and it saves a stunning amount of money without any feeling of deprivation, because you never had to say no. You just had to wait. Solution 4. Replace the reward. A lot of spending happens because people genuinely need a reward, a hit of relief or pleasure after a hard day. The goal isn't to eliminate rewards, that never works, and it makes life miserable. The goal is to find lower-cost alternatives that meet the same need. Exercise, a walk, reading, time with friends, a hobby, a personal project. Each of these can deliver the same emotional payoff, the relief, the pleasure, the reset, without the cost or the regret. You're not removing the reward your brain is asking for, you're giving it a better one. Address the underlying need with something that doesn't drain your account, and the spending loses its job. Solution 5. Make spending harder. Since so much overspending is impulsive and emotional, one of the most effective fixes is simply to add friction, to put small barriers between you and the purchase. Remove your saved credit cards so you have to manually enter the numbers every time. Unsubscribe from marketing emails so the temptations stop arriving in your inbox. Disable one-click purchasing so buying takes more than a single tap. And avoid browsing shopping apps when you're bored, because boredom browsing is where a huge amount of impulse spending begins. The harder you make the purchase process, the fewer emotional purchases happen, because most impulses are fragile, and even a little friction is enough to break them before they turn into a buy. Solution 6. Give every dollar a job. This is the one that ties it all together. Before your income even arrives, decide in advance where it's going to go, to savings, to bills, to investing, to specific spending categories. When every dollar already has a purpose, you're far less likely to spend impulsively, because the money isn't just sitting there unassigned, waiting to be grabbed by the next emotional urge. Money with a plan is money that's already spoken for. Money without a plan is money that quietly disappears. Giving every dollar a job in advance removes the open, undefended pool of cash that impulse spending feeds on. And now here's the reframe I most want you to walk away with, because it lifts a weight off your shoulders. Stop blaming yourself for your spending. The shame and guilt you feel about it isn't just painful, it actually makes the problem worse. Because feeling bad is itself one of the emotional triggers that sends you reaching for another purchase to feel better. You are not weak. You are not irresponsible. You're a normal person with a normal brain, doing what brains do, seeking relief, reward, and belonging. The moment you stop treating this as a character flaw and start treating it as a pattern you can understand and redesign, everything changes. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're finally working with how you actually function. So let me bring it home. Financial success isn't only about earning more money. It's also about understanding the emotions that quietly drive your decisions. When you understand why you spend, you gain real control over how you spend, far more control than any budget alone could ever give you. And notice the goal here. The goal was never to stop spending entirely, to never enjoy anything, to live a joyless life of pure restraint. The goal is simply to make sure your money serves your goals instead of your emotions, to spend on purpose, on the things that genuinely matter to you, instead of on autopilot, chasing feelings that fade in minutes. That's the whole shift. You don't beat overspending with more willpower or another failed budget. You beat it with awareness and a few smart systems. Wait 24 hours, name the real trigger, use a cooling-off list, replace the reward, add friction, and give every dollar a job. Each of those works with your psychology instead of against it. Do them, and spending stops being a force that controls you, and starts being a tool that you control, pointed at the life you actually want to build. Let me go back to that dopamine loop for a second, because understanding the mechanism is what makes the solutions actually work. The reason the stressed person reaches for Amazon isn't weakness, it's that their brain learned a shortcut. Stress is uncomfortable, buying produces a quick hit of dopamine, the discomfort fades for a few minutes. The brain notices that, files it away, and the next time stress shows up, it reaches for the same lever. Over enough repetitions, this becomes automatic, an unconscious pattern that fires before you've even decided anything. That's why willpower alone keeps failing. By the time the rational part of you shows up to argue, the emotional part has already pulled the lever. The fixes work precisely because they interrupt that automatic loop. They insert a pause, a question, a barrier, right at the moment the lever would normally get pulled. Let me make the lifestyle inflation example sharper too, because it's the version of this that quietly does the most long-term damage. Someone gets a raise, real, earned, deserved. And almost immediately, without a conscious decision, the spending rises to match: a nicer car, a bigger apartment, better clothes, an upgraded everything. It feels like the natural reward for the hard work. But notice what didn't change: their long-term security. They're earning more and saving the same, which is to say, not much. Do this through every raise across a career, and you arrive at a strange place. A much higher income and almost nothing to show for it, still feeling stretched, still one bad month from trouble, just at a fancier address. The raise didn't make them more secure, it made them more comfortable in a way that consumed the very money that could have made them secure. And it happened unconsciously, one reasonable upgrade at a time, which is exactly what makes it so hard to catch. Then there's the comparison trap, which social media has turned into a constant low-grade pressure. You're scrolling, and everyone looks like they're doing better. The trips, the cars, the homes, the effortless abundance. You feel, somewhere beneath conscious thought, that you're falling behind. And so you spend to close the gap, to keep up, to feel like you belong. But you're comparing your real, full life, bills and stress and all, to everyone else's curated highlight reel, a game you can't win because it isn't real. Much of that comparison spending is an attempt to buy a feeling of enough, from people who are themselves performing a wealth many of them don't actually have. The purchase gives a flicker of relief, and then the next post resets the bar, and the chase continues. Recognizing that the race is rigged is itself part of stepping out of it. Now let me reinforce why the 6 solutions are built the way they are, because they share a single design principle. Each one works with your psychology instead of trying to overpower it. The 24-hour rule and the cooling-off list both buy time for the emotional spike to fade, so the rational brain gets a vote. Identifying the trigger turns an automatic impulse into a conscious choice by naming the real need underneath it. Replacing the reward honors the fact that your brain genuinely wants a reward and simply gives it a cheaper one. A walk, a workout, a call with a friend, a hobby, instead of trying to white-knuckle the urge away. Making spending harder adds friction at the exact moment the impulse fires, and most impulses are fragile enough that even a small barrier breaks them, and giving every dollar a job removes the open, unassigned pool of cash that impulse spending feeds on, so there's simply less undefended money lying around to grab. None of these rely on you being stronger. They rely on you being smarter about how you're already wired. And here's the emotional shift underneath all of it, the part that matters most. So much of overspending is tangled up with shame. The cycle of buying, regretting, feeling like a failure, and then buying again to escape the bad feeling that the last purchase created. That shame is not just painful, it's fuel for the very fire it's reacting to. The way out begins with self-awareness instead of self-blame, recognizing your patterns without judging yourself for having them, naming your triggers without shame, and feeling the genuine relief that comes from finally understanding behavior that used to feel mysterious and out of control. You are not broken. You are a normal person whose brain does normal brain things, seeking relief, reward, and belonging. When you meet that with curiosity instead of criticism, the whole dynamic softens, and change actually becomes possible. The goal was never to become a person of pure iron discipline who never enjoys anything. The goal is simply to make sure your money serves your goals instead of your emotions, to spend on what genuinely matters to you, on purpose, instead of on autopilot, chasing feelings that fade in minutes and leave a bill that lasts for years. So tell me, what's your spending trigger? Is it stress, boredom, loneliness, social pressure, or that little rush of buying something new? Name it in the comments, because naming it is genuinely the first step to diffusing it, and I read every single one. If this finally explained why you can't stop spending without making you feel bad about it, hit like so it reaches someone who's been blaming their willpower for a problem that was never theirs to win that way. And subscribe, because we're just getting started on the money decisions that actually change your life.